Welcome, everybody. Today, we're going to be talking about planning for your ISO 19650 implementation. We'll go through a step-by-step guide with lots of resources. Hopefully, it will help you to plan and execute an instant implementation that you are going to undertake on your project and for your company. The agenda, we'll start with an introduction to ISO 19650, just briefly, but there's a video resource that you can take and look at and also share so that other people can get up to speed. We'll look at simplifying the process, and we'll actually have a process map that you can take away that will walk you through the steps and make it much easier for you to explain ISO 19650 to others. We'll look at how you'll go about a compliance assessment and understand gaps in your projects and gaps in your implementation. And then we'll talk about the strategic approach and what's important, and finish with lots of tools and lots of resources as well. ISO 19650, just as a level set, it's an international standard, and it's about managing information across the life cycle, not just one or two stages, but the whole of the life cycle of multiple types of built asset. It doesn't matter whether it's a road or a bridge or a building, and it provides a framework for effective collaboration and information exchange on those projects. This is the 5-minute intro, so I'll put a link to that in the chat. That will give you an understanding and level set for everyone else in your team as well. In essence, understanding ISO 19650 requirements, you really have to boil it down to some key elements. And it starts with establishing the roles and responsibilities, who's involved in the project at what stages. So, for example, assigning an information manager function early on so that they can start to put processes in place and understand team's capability and go through the workflow of actually implementing the process. Understanding organizational requirements and project requirements is also important. So why are we doing this? Why are we trying to manage information in a more structured way? What's important for a project that will then meet the organizational requirements? Information management requirements detailed so that they can be exchanged between parties, so we know what complete looks like. Classifications that help teams to establish the same language so that everyone communicates and understands what's being requested. Going right the way through, legal considerations, a lot of understanding of how to keep records and versions and what's shared and what's not, what's published and authorized for use, and understanding transparency in the competency and then the gaps for training. All of this is covered in ISO 19650. In order to understand that process in a lot more detail, it can be quite demanding. There's lots of steps. Here, there are 8 steps from the assessment and need, invitation to tender, the tender response, appointment, mobilization, production, collaborative production of information, the delivery of it, essentially going through that validation process and closing out. So in order to understand this in more detail, this process map should help you a little more. 3 core stages where you are assessing what is required from the owners or the appointing party's perspective. You are contracting for those requirements in a detailed form that people can actually understand and deliver to. And then you're delivering and learning from and continually iterating on that set of information requirements. We have a lot more detailed explanation of this, but to break it down into those 3 phases, where the appointing party assigns somebody the information manager role, they define organizational, hopefully that are defined already, but wrap this requirement into project requirements with asset information requirements that are rolled into an exchange information requirements document. Essentially, this is the set of tender information that people will then have a tender response from. And that could be multiple parties trying to become the lead appointed party, the main person that's taking this as their contract. But they'll also have input from others, which will be the appointed parties. And those appointed parties might have tasks that are summarized as a master plan of all of the tasks that are required to fulfill the contract. And that's what becomes the contract and the appointment document. This is when the lead appointed party has been selected, and the team is then fulfilling the obligation to define in more detail what's going to be delivered and contracting it for it. As we go through the production of this information, and the management and the validation of the information in accordance with the information requirements, that's where we start to get into the project delivery phases as well. This is an iterative process as well for each party that's brought on board throughout the project. We can dig in a lot more detail, but that's a high-level summary of what the process entails. It's important to understand that the process in its entirety is possibly not every single step for you. Depends on your role. If you're an appointing party, then obviously the lead up, the establishing of exchange information requirements is much more important to you. If you're later on down in the timeline, it's about how to comply with that and how to fulfill those obligations, how to roll up your tasks into a master information delivery plan and such things. So the requirements that apply to you is important. And then you can understand of those requirements, what are the compliance criteria? What are you really trying to do? And how you might identify the discrepancies using a gap analysis. Being able to review existing processes, collect data and identify the discrepancies between them. Ask us about a gap analysis if that's interesting for you. But this is really where you can identify what you need to do in order to become compliant with the process, with the workflows. And once you've defined those gaps, it's all about setting smart goals, understanding what the resources are in order to be able to achieve this, and aligning strategically with your organization so that what you're doing is not going to be something that's just done in a box, done as a sideline or a parallel process. You really need to make sure that it's integrated with your workflows and what you're doing today. Here's one resource, actually 17 resources in this playlist. This has a plethora of how to understand what ISO 19650 is about, to how to get access to templates, to how to run the workflows, through to how to strategically align your business to this. There's actually hours and hours of resources here that might be useful for you. In order to understand the ISO 19650 workflow, it's really to see it as a framework. And in order to implement it in a way that's actually going to be useful for your company, you're going to need some tools that help you do certain things. One of them is about managing resources. You end up with lots of templates and lots of documents and lots of processes and lots of understanding of how to do things, methods of producing things. So you need a robust system in order to be able to manage those templates and manage those resources in line with the ISO 19650 requirements. Also, project management tools are all about helping to increase collaboration, bringing multiple parties into the same place so that you can really have a communication strategy that is live, that is online, that is continuously getting feedback from team members and improving the requirements and improving the delivery so that you can get alignment on what's expected and alignment on delivery. And then as you're delivering, hopefully those requirements have been set up in a way that can be automatically checked through the quality process. So this is really where you start to try to identify automation in the quality assurance that will reduce the manual errors, improve efficiency, and make sure that you can actually focus on team decision-making tasks and continuous improvement. So more critical focus on critical tasks. In order to manage your documents, you need a tool that is going to be online, that's going to be collaborative, so you can have multi-parties editing, permission-based, so you can have multiple documents and have permissions for certain documents accessed by certain parties or certain teams, and then have a review and approval process along with commenting and a really clear way of defining what is authorized for use, what's published, and what is not quite what's in progress. Word documents are not really collaborative. They're not really a way of defining this in a clear way. So try and find yourself an online tool to be able to manage that process of resources for your BIM execution plan, your exchange information requirements, your meeting minutes, your everything that's defined in a resource in the ISO 19650 workflow. When you're defining information requirements, sometimes teams gravitate towards Excel. Unfortunately, when using Excel, we tend to create a cumbersome set of unreadable and actually not machine readable, sometimes not even human readable information requirements. So what we suggest is using a dedicated database that has a structured framework that you can define exactly what the requirements are, what the information is, who's responsible for it, at what point in time, and have it in a machine readable way that can then be used by other systems to be able to create the information requirements and also automatically check them later. And then when you start to define your information requirements in a structured way, you can start to have teams that will autonomously check their information requirements against their information deliveries. As they're delivering a model, in this example, it's showing what is accepted against the information requirements and what is not quite, what needs a little bit more work. As you establish a quality control process and then automate it as much as possible, it allows teams to self-validate so that they're not having to wait for a report of the errors and the problems with all of their model deliverables, and they can fix it before they actually need to have anyone review it. They can do it all on their own. When you're managing so many different sets of files, it's important to keep them in the same place. So the common data environment is an important part of that workflow, a way to be able to have permissions, many different file formats in the ISO 19650 workflow. That's an important, sometimes cumbersome demand from the ISO 19650 processes and standards. Having that automated will save you a bunch of time. It's more than just saying that you do ISO 19650. It's needing a lot more training, education with your teams, making sure that everyone's equipped with the knowledge and skills necessary to implement. It's about monitoring and evaluating what you're doing and how you're actually complying with and learning from. If you monitor and have those SMART goals, you can continuously identify opportunities for improvement. And that cycle is all about understanding what you've done, seeing whether you can do something differently to make an improvement, and then making sure that that's implemented on the next project, if not the next phase of the current project. If you want to make sure that the implementation for your teams goes well, it's all your organization, getting leadership engagement, having involvement from many teams and departments across your company, and the impact of these changes early is very, very important. Get buy-in from your top leadership and make sure that more people are involved and they understand the impact of that change. As you're implementing it, you need feedback mechanisms. You need to be able to understand, using those SMART objectives, how you're performing against them, measure it, and then adapt and plan accordingly. Here are a few additional resources we created that is aligned with ISO 19650, 100 videos, 2 minutes long each, in how to produce those resources and how to get certified. If you're building structured data, it's all about using the Building Smart Data Dictionary and the Information Delivery Specification. So there's a video here about how to do that and how to automate that process. If you're following the ISO 19650 workflows, you need to understand what level of information need is and how to use that in a structured way so that you can communicate with others. If you're handing information over, there's a video here about how to make COBie handover. Most of the time that's implemented along with ISO 19650, depending on where you are around the world and which standards are you following. But this is an easy way in 3 steps to make the handover of COBie information really simple. This is about getting ready for ISO 19650. So we've got a series of videos here about how to get trained, how to get audited, and how to get certified. If you actually want to get involved yourself on the certification side, we've got a series here about how you could be an assessor for ISO 19650 as more and more companies are needing people like you to get certified. This pyramid of requirements, it starts with people, and your implementation is only going to be successful if you get executive buy-in. So if you don't have buy-in today, ask for the business case template that we have. We can give you that so you can get started with really putting a good foot forward and getting the message across to your executive leadership and understand why it's important and how to get that first step on the ladder towards getting your training and audit and certification. Thank you so much for being here with us at the planning stage. We are excited about all of the other presentations that are going to be coming. Hopefully we can be part of your journey as you look to get ISO 19650 certified. We're here to help and we're here to make it simple. Take care, everyone. Enjoy your day.